Hey, what's going on, everyone? Running a little behind today. Cool. Okay, let me just get my notebook thing and I'll rock and roll. Okay, cool. Michael, what is up? Good to see you. We're going to get started in a second. We'll be talking about how to get rid of stubborn pockets of fat on your body today, which is a very common problem for most people. Like even people that are successful at losing a lot of weight, it seems like at the end of their journey, especially, although they possibly might have lost a lot of weight, they still have stubborn pockets of fat in like their chest, their midsection, their love handles, sometimes the inner thighs as well, or on the butt. And I'm going to talk about how to get rid of those stubborn areas of fat, drug free and all that stuff. Bob, Richard, good to see you. Michael, good to see you as well. So organic coffee as always, all right? Never in plastic, stainless steel or glass only. Okay, so let's rock and roll. So today we'll be talking about how to get rid of stubborn pockets of body fat. And this is kind of like a very common problem that people run into a lot in their fat loss journey. In particular, you'll see that even if a person does successfully lose a lot of body fat or a lot of weight in general, they still kind of like, oh, you hear the story like, oh, well, I got rid of fat everywhere, but it just seems this body fat in my lower midsection kind of seems to linger no matter what I do. And in short, what you have to understand there in that perspective is just the body fat is still too high for that particular person, okay? And it's going to vary from Ed, good to see you. Bob and Richard, good to see you as well. Thanks for jumping in. And it's going to vary from person to person, right? So in short, if you have, stubborn pockets of fat around the chest, lower chest in particular, around the midsection, you can take kind of pictures of your back shirtless, for example, and you have stubborn pockets of fat on like your love handles. Those are all very common with males. And it's just an indication that your body fat is still way too high. So you could just do a visual test and just look in the mirror. And if you feel like you're not happy with your current level of leanness, that just simply indicates the body fat is too high for you personally. If you want to be more objective about it, you could do a DEXA scan. It's spelled DEXA, usually in all caps. And you can simply Google that and go like DEXA scan body fat in my area or something of that sort. And a bunch of locations will pop up. You can have your body fat test taken and see where your current body fat percentage is. So most males are around like 25+%. You have to remember that 20% is considered overweight, 25+% is considered basically obese, and most males are around that 25+%. And that way you can have like a good starting place or a good objective starting point of where your current body fat percentage is. But again, those do cost around, they're not like over the top, and I would recommend, getting it done at least once just for the experience. Not like you have to get it done all the time. They're around like $100 or so, and they're usually administered in like medical centers. But usually just a visual test is more than good enough, especially if your goals are aesthetic and you want to kind of improve your body or composition visually. Then the sure tell sign is like, hey, you got to look in the mirror or take a picture of yourself. And I'm like, hey, am I as lean as I want to be, or are my proportions how I want them to look like? And if they're not, and it's going to vary from person to person, obviously, then in short, you just have to continue to decrease your body fat percentage. There is no specific way you can kind of spot reduce body fat. So for example, if you have like unwanted lower chest body fat or something of that sort. And I'm going to cover piece by piece how you can go about improving these areas. But in short, there's no way to basically spot reduce any of these areas. You just have to overall decrease your body fat percentage and just the amount of fat mass you have on your body in general. And then eventually that area will flatten out or be as lean as you're looking for it to be lean, et cetera, et cetera. So that's really the only solution. Once again, everyone is going to vary, and everyone varies in terms of where they have a propensity to store body fat as well. So some people, store it in their chest. Some people store it in their midsection. Some people store it in their love handles, et cetera, et cetera. And it's going to vary from person to person. And some areas at the end of your journey, especially, might look extremely lean, but you still might have that stubborn body fat in that lower midsection or something of that sort. But it still indicates that you do need to decrease your body fat percentage even more if it's not like the leanness or the type of look you're aiming for. 10% is a good ballpark for males. 10% body fat is just a very good healthy body fat to be around as well. 10 and 12%, just to give you guys a visual, I'm kind of like a little bit on the higher end, around 13% or so, but still able to maintain a lean looking appearance. So you can imagine if you get down to 10% or below, and then obviously if you want to look like super ripped and super shredded, usually it's around like the 6% mark or something of that sort, where the muscle separation and striations start looking very, very noticeable because your body fat's very, very low. So some problems that do arise, a very common problem that actually arises in with people that you see today, is a lot of times, for example, like a client would start a fat loss journey with a decent amount of body fat. So let's say they're like 220 pounds or something of that sort, 230 pounds, let's say at 6 feet tall male. And they do have like a lot of body fat. So for example, they may be like 30%, which is actually fairly common these days, or 25%. And they don't have that much muscle mass. So sometimes what happens is when they get to a lower body weight, they still find that they retain excessive body fat in areas they don't want to see that body fat gain in, but they're too lean already. So in some situations like that, you might have to, for example, just stop their fat loss journey at a certain point and work at a lean muscle gain, where inevitably you will regain a little teeny bit of body fat, but hopefully quite a bit of muscle, and then cut down again a little bit until the body composition is achieved. And you might have to do these cycles multiple times with clients to make that happen, et cetera, et cetera. So that's a solution for that case. Another situation is, for example, if you have like stubborn pockets of body fat, for example, or stuff of that sort, is to kind of enhance the visual look of your body overall. So during a cutting phase, maybe work on enhancing the musculature of your upper body. So making your shoulders a lot wider, making your chest a lot more pronounced, even little things like making your upper traps just a lot more pronounced. Although the upper traps in general, they're not like a super huge muscle group or anything of that sort, but when they are developed, it gives your upper body just a lot more of a denser and muscular appearance, and thus making your midsection just look a lot more narrow as well. So that could help also, and just in general enhancing the width of the hips or the density of the glutes as well, which is great, especially for people that are 30 or 40 plus, because if you're not active, you notice the glutes begin to droop like very, very quickly. And that's not like a look most people are okay with. So oftentimes they just don't like how their butt kind of sags. So on top of just training the glutes a lot more, they're going to look a lot firmer, but also just making them bigger in general can help make your midsection look a lot leaner, from especially the side, and the back view can make it look just a lot more exaggerated, and that V-tapered more exaggerated, et cetera, et cetera. Same thing with the back profile. Like if you just develop your lats a lot more, the lats are these muscles right over here. If they're just a lot more pronounced, and they are the biggest muscle group in your upper body, if they're just more pronounced and wider, obviously your midsection would look a lot leaner just already. So you might not even need to drop into very low body fat percentages to make your midsection look very, very lean. And I'm a perfect example of that. So my body fat percentage is not that low. It's around 13 or 14% right now. But you guys could see here, and I post, workout videos or whatever in our group consistently as well. I still look very, very lean. That's just because my upper body looks very, very wide, and optically just makes my midsection look a lot leaner than it actually is. So I don't have to dip into unhealthy low body fat percentages year-round just to kind of maintain that leaner appearance. And also, unless you're extremely muscular already, having like a very low body fat percentage would just make you just look very thin in general. So if you have a low body fat percentage plus a low muscle mass, you just developed a very thin and kind of depleted look, maybe with a really good pump, you might be able to have that volume and density in the musculature you're looking after. But after the pump obviously dissipates, then you just go back to a very thin and shriveled appearance, which is more obvious too when you're wearing clothing, for example, because the clothing tends to look very, very baggy. So that's another issue. So unless you're very muscular already, and some people like that look, and that's okay if you're in that situation. But unless you're very muscular already, dipping down to very low body fat percentage will leave you just looking very, very skinny for the most part and stuff of that sort. So Brandon Felix T. Van, let me know if I pronounced that correct. Victor is here as well. Good to see you, Ed. Good to see you guys. Just going to grab a drink here. So that's one issue that could happen. Richard, good to see you. Thanks for jumping in. That's one issue that could happen when you try to diet down too much while not having a lot of muscle. And there is a common question that gets asked. Usually when I mention that, it's like, oh, can I gain a lot of muscle while losing a lot of body fat at the same time? And my short answer, there are some minor exceptions. I'll list them here, but the short answer is no. You could either, for the most part, just focus on losing body fat predominantly or gaining muscle predominantly. And you're not going to be able to do both at one time. There are some rare situations, and these rare situations are, for example, if you have a client that comes in that's very overweight, so pretty much their body fat percentage is 25 plus, they're basically obese, and they happen to be new to weightlifting. Because remember, your first, 1 or 2 or maybe 3 years, you're going to be able, especially if you're not experienced, you're going to be able to gain quite a bit of muscle in what's referred to as kind of newbie gains. And it's very easy, especially if you're on a really good program, to gain quite a bit of muscle your first 2 to 3 years. But then after that, the body tends to plateau, and muscle gain still is possible, but it's definitely not as rapid as it was in those 2 to 3 years, sometimes maybe 4 years for certain people, etc., etc. So if you have a situation where a person is just very overweight plus new to weightlifting, they actually could gain quite a bit of muscle while losing quite a bit of fat at the same time. Another situation is if you have a person that is coming back from an injury, like they were not they happen to be very muscular initially, but they got injured and didn't lift any weights for 8 to 12 months or something of that sort. Then and they happen to maybe not be so sharp with their diet, and because they're sedentary, because of their injury, they gained quite a bit of body fat. So in that situation, that person could also actually lose quite a bit of body fat and gain quite a bit of muscle as well, all at the same time. But remember, they're really gaining the muscle they've already once had, but happen to lose just because due to inactivity and not working out due to their injury as well. So, and stuff of that sort, that's really the only two situations where you can gain a lot of muscle and lose a lot of body fat all at the same time, at least for a little while. But for a lot of people, it's really just the focus should be on either fat loss or muscle gain initially. And here's how to tell what you need to focus on. It's very easy, and these are just my opinions here because everyone's goal is different too. And obviously, if I don't meet with you guys or talk to you personally, I don't know what you're trying to accomplish. So don't take anything I say here on surface value. But let's say you have a 40-year-old male that's 20% body fat, so they're overweight, and they come to you, they're like, oh, I want to lose muscle and gain, I want to rather lose body fat and gain muscle. Okay, so I'll be like, and it depends on a few other variables. Let's say they want to aesthetically develop their physique, et cetera, and kind of work on a few health markers. So I would suggest for this person to first, and let's say they have actually been working out on and off for like 10 years, so they definitely don't have that newbie gain period. So I would suggest for this person to bring their body fat down to healthy levels at first. So take their body fat from 20% down to at least 12%, and then transition to more of a muscle gain program if they're really concerned with body fat, more of a conservative approach. So basically they would gain 2 pounds a month, 3 pounds a month until their desired dimensions are achieved. Inevitably, even with a good lean muscle gain program, you're going to gain some body fat back But it's okay in this situation if you do it right, especially if you don't go over 15% body fat. So let's say you got the client down from 20% to 12%, and the client, he's happy with the leanness and the way his body looks. And then, okay, you can transition them over to a lean bulk program. And in that case, gain like 2 to 3 pounds a month. And just make sure you do it in a conservative way so that the body fat doesn't go over 15%. And it depends on what you're looking for, but that's a general rule that works probably pretty well for most people. It's a rule that I follow for myself as well. I've been over 15% a few times too, and you could do it for short periods of time for sure, but it's just, the physique starts looking a bit too sloppy at that percentage range, et cetera, et cetera. So David is asking, this is working well for me, which is to get fat off my body first. Yes. So David, it's good to see you here. I know we talk a lot during the week. Also, I see Eric and Larry jumped in. Good to see you guys also. And and once again, it depends. And this is where it's so tough for me to give concrete advice on these lives, because inevitably there are no absolutes and each individual person is so different. Nature is a novelty generator, and there are no 2 grains of sand that are the same on the entire planet, moreover, the same people. So everyone has different needs. Even if their goal is the same on the surface, how they got to that health problem or whatever, the excess weight. Let's say you have subject A that's 20 pounds overweight and subject B that's 20 pounds overweight. The reason subject A gained those 20 excess pounds and the reason subject B gained those 20 excess pounds could be completely different. Thus, the approach needs to be completely different as well. As Walensky would say, you have to meet the problem at the level of the problem. So unless you know the person specifically, it's really tough to give concrete health advice online, which is what I tell you guys to be very careful when you're following anyone online, even if they are really good. It's just they never met you. So their information can be taken out of context, especially very easily, especially if you're not very familiar with that subject as well. It's very easy to kind of misuse or not properly use or apply that information to your given situation and stuff of that sort. So so those are some situations in terms of like where to focus on in terms of fat gain and muscle gain, or fat loss and muscle gain, et cetera, et cetera. And some other things to focus on as well. So for example, the level of chronic stress you have in your daily life can impact your body composition to a certain degree. So typically, like a lot of people with low-grade chronic stress will typically, over a long period of time, this doesn't happen overnight for most people, is reposition the way your body stores body fat. So typically, people with a lot of chronic stress, they have a pear shape to their physique. So they might run into that situation of like, hey, I'm so lean on my upper body, so lean on my legs, on my glutes, but it seems like this little bit of body fat on my lower midsection just doesn't disappear. So in the immediate moment, you could tell that person just to continue to lose their body fat possibly, and keep reducing their body fat even more and more. But the problem is, at a certain point, you just start looking too thin and you start losing too much size everywhere else, and the end product might not be as visually as appealing. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like a trade-off at a certain point. So maybe a good situation for certain people, once again, you got to really know the person well and see if the problem is at that level, is to educate them on central nervous system management, which is rarely done in the education system. Rarely, especially in America, do people know anything about this subject. It's not even a subject that's spoken about, but it's very, very important because inevitably it's important for a person to understand that the central nervous system has gone through, tens of thousands, actually around 200,000 years of evolution in terms of just talking about the Homo sapiens species. But remember, there have been, 28 or so human species that have come and gone over the millions of years of evolution too. And the Homo sapien is just the last standing ape, basically, or whatever you want to believe how evolution happened. And it's gone through very slow and methodical evolution to basically deal very well with extreme stresses, followed by valleys of absolutely nothing going on. So you go hunt a mammoth, is very stressful, obviously, but then, after the hunt is over, you're basically hanging out in the woods and drinking spring water, and really nothing's going on for quite a while. And then once again, a hunt arises again. So you can see it's a steep peak and then followed by a valley of nothing going on. And that's ideally how the central nervous system has evolved to function. And it is a very far cry from how people live today, especially in Western culture, or the very on-the-go and achievement-driven American culture. Always got to be doing something, always got to, achieve one thing, got to do another thing. The saying goes also, you're not doing your job unless you're dying for your job is a very common theme in a lot of corporate offices, especially. Although they may say they're more health conscious, but it's just the general overriding theme, et cetera, et cetera. And a lot of those micro stresses have become normalized and are not seen as a big deal by the average person. So, the average person is like, okay, I get stuck in traffic for like 2 hours a day. It's not a big deal, but really it is a big deal, especially if you combine if you add up your total stress load, it could be pretty high, and it is pretty high for most people. So, the average person, I mentioned this many times on lives, get up tired, they're functioning off like 5 hours of sleep. They get some coffee, that spikes their cortisol. They get on the freeway, you got a whole bunch of cars moving. It's actually pretty stressful on the central nervous system to be in that type of environment. Let's say you might be running late, you get to the office. You might not enjoy working with everyone at the office. There's always that one employee that you don't enjoy working with or see eye to eye on. That causes a lot of chronic micro stress. You go out to lunch, eat some inflammatory foods, that causes stress on the body as well. So remember, stress can take on a myriad of themes. An injury to the body can be stressful. A bad relationship could be stressful. Financial stress is stressful. You know what I mean? Maybe a harsh internal critic that's not well managed by the individual could be stressful as well. And that kind of follows the person around everywhere, basically. Peer pressure, whatever, a myriad of other things. So all of these things combined are just produce like an endless list of stressors that makes it really tough on the central nervous system to deal with. And people burn out and break down very easily. And just look at the state of health in America today. You have 9 out of 10 American adults that are metabolically sick. So that's a perfect objective way of showing, people are far detached from how the Homo sapien has evolved to really live and function. So to give you an idea, how far are you off from, you wake up in the morning, you go hunting for 2 or 3 hours or so, maybe a little bit longer if the hunt's not that successful. And then you just hang out in the woods all day, and that's pretty much like your life. And then you go to sleep before when the sun goes down right away, because you can't see anything anyways after that point. So how far detached are you? Probably quite a bit of people are extremely far detached from that, So what I'm saying is it's important to educate a person on this, because if they have a tremendous amount of chronic stress in their life, they do have a lot of cortisol production, at least initially, until their body stops producing cortisol altogether because it's in a short supply, and then have like adrenal fatigue issues, erectile dysfunction, maybe irritability, and then followed by depression. First, it's usually irritability and anger, and then when they burn out, it's usually followed by depression, et cetera, and stuff of that sort. But for aesthetic reasons, when you do have an abundance of stress in your life, especially when it's micro stresses, don't discount those. That could lead to that stubborn fat storage around the midsection, so you can kind of lean out quite a bit, but then that little midsection just doesn't seem to want to go away. And in order for you to really lean that out, you have to lose just too much weight, too much body fat, which isn't sustainable or healthy for you to do long term anyway. So you're kind of in this dilemma, you know what I mean? Like, oh, I do have this stubborn pocket of fat, but if I lose even more weight, then overall I just look more depleted, or just my proportions aren't as well. So I did lose that, bit, but also just I lost a lot of other things to make that happen, and it's just too great of a loss overall. And then on top of that, the main theme that I'm trying to say is just it's not sustainable to be walking around at 8, 7, or 6% body fat all year round, nor is it healthy for you to do that, especially for your hormones and stuff of that sort. So that's another way of looking at it as well. and instead of just looking at it like I just need to lose body fat, et cetera, et cetera. So there are a lot of things to consider too, but those are just a few variables to look at. I do a lot of things I do like an HAQ test with my client that determines, a lot of their biological markers and stuff of that sort and see how well they're doing like under their appearance. That way you can, if they have gut issues, you can fix those, because obviously if you have bloating in your midsection, not only does it feel uncomfortable, but it gives your gut that distended type of look, which again makes you not look as lean as you possibly are actually as well. And also it's just uncomfortable to have various digestive issues and stuff of that sort. Then their central nervous system management, obviously their musculoskeletal health is very important too, because if a person has, a lot of back pain, for example, it's going to be really tough to work out with confidence, and also just tough to work out with the appropriate level of intensity. So that could hinder losing those, few pounds of stubborn body fat and stuff of that sort. Although in total, just know that working out is a very small part of the fat loss journey. It mainly, once again, falls down to nutrition and lifestyle variables. Nutrition can be divided into the total amount of calorie intake you need, which varies from person to person. You definitely need a deficit to lose weight because your body can't gain body fat in a caloric deficit. So that's important. But also the sourcing of your nutrients are important too. So for example, maybe instead of having cereal for your carbohydrates, it might be a better choice to consistently have maybe fruit, especially like organic fruit or stuff of that sort, for example. And then also you could obviously play around with the macros, being the protein, fat, and carbohydrates, and kind of change them to your individual needs. And once again, it's going to vary from person to person, depending on the stage of their journey they're on as well. You shouldn't just be on a flat, across the board, same exact nutrition program, for example, for like 5, 10, 15 months in a row. And your nutrition program, once again, is going to be different from like a fat loss phase to a muscle gain phase. And it's going to be different for your personal composition. So if you guys follow the nutrition program I follow of eating nearly 4,000 calories a day, that's probably going to result in excess weight gain, even if you're sourcing for very high quality pasture raised operations or whatever. But for me, that's like a maintenance calorie range, and I did a whole video on, how to boost up your resting metabolic rate so that you are a calorie burning machine, which is one important variable to consider when you're thinking about long-term success. Because if your metabolism is very poor, due to various reasons, mainly low muscle mass, it's just you're going to have to maintain a low-calorie diet to maintain your weight your whole entire life, which some people could do, no doubt, but it's very restricting. Remember, you want it to be as easy as possible, and one thing you can do is just have a very high resting metabolic rate, which is predominantly dependent on your total amount of muscle mass available on your body. Of course, you can have a lot more activity during the day and stuff of that sort, and eat foods that require, more energy to break down. All these little things help for sure. But really the big one is just to have like a very high resting metabolic rate. So you're burning a lot of calories without really doing too much. And then if you do something like lifting weights, you just burn even more calories while doing that, for example. And it makes it just a lot more sustainable. And then also just having a more muscular physique would be probably a good idea for a lot of people that have very low muscle mass for various reasons, aesthetic and health reasons as well. So that's something else to consider. So there are some ways to look at it right there. I hope that kind of clarified it. But once again, everyone is going to be different. Another really quick before I call it a day, another common problem, especially with males, is having lower chest body fat, right? And it's the same exact thing. If you have excess lower chest body fat, you just decrease your body fat to at least 10%, for example. That's what I would do personally, and just see how it looks there. Sometimes, especially if you've been a little overweight for too long, you do have a bit of sagginess in that area because the body fat tends to push the skin down over time because of how gravity works, right? So once you lose that body fat, the skin still tends to be stretched out and a little bit droopy. So a way to counter that is just to really develop the chest quite a bit. So there are all these little tricks you can do to really home in on the details of improving the aesthetic appeal of your physique, and then also getting rid of those stubborn pockets of body fat. But that's really the key. The first key is to really just actually get your body fat low enough and see where you are from there, and then kind of go from there and tinker and customize it to yourself, basically. Okay. All right, you guys. Raphael, good to see you. Donald, good to see you as well. Ty, let me know if I pronounced your name right. Eric, good to see you. David. All right, you guys. So I have my dad visiting here. I'm going to call it short today, just so I can spend some more time with him. Joshua, good to see you. We just finished, but thanks for jumping in, though. But this will be posted in the group, so you guys can check it out later, okay? All right. Have a good one, everyone. Cody as well.